Hey guys, we are back updating the power rankings for Big Brother 26 towards the end of week 11. And obviously, we are now at the end game. We're past the double eviction. We're down to the final five. Now, I am recording this on Monday, September 30th, a day earlier than usual. And that's because tomorrow I'll be coming out with my jury scenarios video, where I'll be talking about each of the possible final two scenarios and breaking out what I think would happen with a jury vote there, so stay tuned for that. But we have 7 people to talk about, and so wasting more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 7, we have the first boot from the double eviction, and here we have Leah. And again, not too surprising here, she was a pretty clear target by the end of the week, and there was very little push to shift the target elsewhere to where obviously Leah was going to be the clear target by the end of it. Not too much to say there. Now, I will say that it was kind of funny seeing Leah being the last person on the season to be nominated, considering there were many points across the season where she probably should have been targeted, considering that she was aligned with Quinn for a lot of the season and openly talked crap about Quinn, but for some reason, like the likes of Kemo or Rina never actually told Quinn about this, even though they had planned to. And considering where Leah stood in the game, I mean, it is funny how she was able to navigate through a lot of the game, considering the position she was in. Now, obviously, it's pretty disappointing seeing that she failed to take the shot when she had literally articulated the week before winning her HOH that she would have done so, and she even herself realized that she made a mistake, but it was obviously too late by that point. So again, not too much to say here. She's out of the game now, which is why she's here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and we have the other boot from the double eviction, and here we have Angela. And it's obviously a shame seeing Angela going out here, considering she came relatively close to winning the HOH here, to where had she had won that double eviction HOH, she could have brought some chaos along the way. Now, who knows whether it would have been effective or not, but still, the fact that we were pretty close to an Angela HOH is pretty wild. But obviously, she came up short, and at the point where Chelsea won HOH, she did become Chelsea's main target here, where even though Chelsea and Kemo talked before the double about possibly taking the shot at MJ, they kind of agreed that they would have only done so had Kemo or Rina put them up, where they themselves were unwilling to actually put MJ up, and we saw that play out, where Angela was put up as the main target, and even after Kemo won the veto, Rina was the replacement nom as the pawn, and we saw Angela being taken out pretty decisively here. And if we are talking about Angela more generally, I mean, there's obviously a lot that can be said about Angela. She is a pretty bad player, someone who was definitely prone to sabotaging herself on multiple opportunities. She was pretty emotional, and she was someone who probably would not have won a jury vote had she gotten towards the end, even though a lot of the people in the game talked about her as someone who probably was a bigger jury threat, considering she had won several competitions and considering that she was at least willing to make moves, which are minor pros I will give her as a player. The fact that she was willing to target Matt during the first week, someone who probably would not have been targeted under most situations here. And then even during Leah's HOH, while Leah was unwilling to target Chelsea and T-Court directly, we had Angela being the more forthright player and wanting to target one of those two players. So I do think there are some things you can credit Angela for, and I do think she probably would have had a case had she gotten to final 2, or even though I feel like she would not have won by the end of the day, considering how very little people took her seriously by the end of it. I still think Angela definitely had some things to point out with her as a player, on top of her being a pretty great character for the show, but obviously she is now out of the game, which is why she's here at number 6. And with that, we have 5 players left in the game to talk about. As usual, we'll be ranking them based on how likely they think they are to win the game based on their current game position. But number 5, we have the person who is the most likely to go home on Thursday night, and here we have Kemo. And Kemo's pretty much done here. Now, to be fair, there was a shot that the target could have shifted to Cam or possibly even Rina, though those talks die out by the time of the veto meeting. And I feel like Kemo himself plays his week pretty poorly, where he does almost no work in actually talking to MJ, where even though he and Rina talked about talking to MJ to possibly get her to use the veto there, but ultimately Kemo doesn't even talk to MJ by the end of it, because that's Kemo for you. And with him being seen as the bigger comp competitor, considering he had just won the veto last week, I do think Kemo's pretty screwed here. I don't think there's really much of a chance of him staying, which is obviously a shame, as I do like Kemo a good amount, but he's just such a passive player where, again, the fact that there was this opportunity for the target to shift away from him, only for him to do absolutely nothing to put in the work to try to get that to go through kind of speaks to how Kemo, at the end of the day, is a pretty passive player and someone who will probably be taken out on Thursday night, which is why he's here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and this is a person who is safe for the week, and they did do some good work in making themselves safe, but I think this week also highlighted the fact that this person is probably not winning if they get to the end, and I feel like they'll probably have a tough path in getting there. But number 4, we do have Cam. And obviously, Cam was someone who was considered a target at one point during the week, in large part due to his poor performance during the veto BB Comics, where he had told people that he had taken a break during it, that he was struggling during it, and that caused the likes of MJ and Chelsea to think that he had thrown it and that he's simply waiting for Final Four to start winning now, which is obviously bad on their end, the fact that they think that he's still throwing cons at Final 5 when he wasn't, but obviously it's bad in the sense that Cam himself was considered a target this week, not because he was a physical threat, but because he sucked at the competition so badly. Now, to be fair, he does do some good work. He's able to clear the air with Chelsea and MJ by assuring them that he just sucked at the comp, and that's why he did so poorly there, which was enough to get MJ to not want to put him up. But I think this week just also highlighted that Cam isn't really seen as that big of a jury threat, where, for one, you had the fact that he has not won many comps, despite him coming off as a stereotypical comp beast, which has caused a lot of players in the house to think that he's not that big of a jury threat because he's not won many comps. But then on top of that, you have the women talking about wanting to work together, how they want an all-women Final 3, which I think also puts Cam in a bad spot, as it probably means that he'll be in danger in Final 4 if he doesn't win one of those comps. So I do think Cam is in a weird spot at this point where he's not necessarily guaranteed to get towards the end, one, because there are people that don't want to take him and want to target him soon, but also because he is not guaranteed to win the comps to get his way to the end. But then on top of that, you have this perception that he's probably not going to win a jury vote because, he just has no resume apparently. And admittedly, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think he has played somewhat impressively during the season, but I feel like the cast is just not really respected him that much, and I think that makes it hard for me to have him too much higher in this ranking. Now, obviously, there's still plenty of time left in the game. He could potentially turn it up in the comps. He can make some moves, cut Chelsea along the way, and put moves on his resume that makes him more of a jury threat. But I feel like based off what we've been hearing and based off the perception that he has, not to mention that his positioning is not that secure coming into the Final Four, it's kind of hard for me to have him higher than number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and we have the current HOH and veto holder, but we do have MJ. And I'm actually surprised MJ is this high considering how massive of a target she was coming into the Final 5 round. Where even though Chelsea was not willing to target her directly, she was obviously put in a precarious spot into Final 5 to where she probably would have been targeted in most situations, only for her to win the HOH instead. And obviously you have her once again kind of doing Chelsea's bidding by targeting the likes of Kemo and Rubina. And you also had her considering this plan of using the veto on Rubina while still targeting Kemo to try to build favor with Rubina, which I think would have been a disastrous move for her, as it would have just given Rubina false hope and just burned her along the way, though she doesn't end up doing that. Not to mention that by winning the Final 5 HOH, she's putting herself in a precarious spot of Final 4 to where she will now only have one shot to save herself through the veto there, in a spot to where she'll still be seen as a target. I don't think she's necessarily locked safe to get to the Final 3, but at the same time, I think she's also pretty clearly the strongest competitor left on the board, where while Chelsea is no slouch, I think MJ's in a prime spot to win out from this point on, which I think is a pro to give her. And on top of that, I think she's not necessarily the GOAT that I thought she was, where while I think the optics of targeting Leah during her own HOH is pretty bad, you had the likes of Rubina telling MJ, after MJ had told her that she would lose against Chelsea at the end, that Rubina would vote for her, which is pretty insane for Rubina to say, the fact that she would tell MJ that she would vote for her against Chelsea when it's clearly in Rubina's best interest to get MJ to cut Chelsea. So for Rubina to say this in a spot probably means that Rubina's being genuine here, which I think is probably a pro for MJ in the sense that she probably has more of a shot in some of these Final 2 scenarios, which I'll be discussing in more detail in tomorrow's video. But I don't think MJ is necessarily a GOAT, where if she's able to win her way out and is able to at least make some moves along the way, I think there's definitely a case for her to be made that she could get some jury votes there. So again, I don't think MJ is necessarily dead in the water. Plus, it does seem like she is in a more secure position now to get to the Final 3, considering there is this talk about there being an all-women Final 3 with her, Chelsea, and Rubina there. And while I still think MJ is willing to take Chelsea to final two, as she admitted to Rubina. I think there's still enough time for her to grow a spine of her own to potentially cut Chelsea at 3, which is probably her best case scenario at this point. So again, while I have not found MJ's game particularly impressive at all, and I would be pretty underwhelmed if she simply won her way out, I think there is more of a path for MJ to potentially win the game than I initially gave her credit for, and there's more of a path for her to at least get to final 3, which I think is something, which is why she's here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and we have someone who is actually on the block right now, but we do have Rubina. And do I actually think Rubina played that well this week? Not necessarily, where there was this plan to try to get Kemo as a target, but Rubina does almost no work to get that to go through, and sure enough, the plan eventually crumbles, and MJ just decides to leave the noms the same, which is not particularly great there. And at the end of the day, I feel like Rubina's game has not been overly impressive, and I probably would say that Cam's a better player than Rubina, but I do think Rubina has more win equity than Cam, where I think there will be more sentiment to vote for Rubina in most situations if she gets towards the end. And plus, I think Rubina should be safe coming into the next round, where at this point, while she is on the block, she is the pawn. And there is this talk now about this final 3 deal between Chelsea, MJ, and Rubina, which I think would be pretty good for Rubina here. And even if Cam's able to slip on through. So I think Rubina definitely has a path moving forward to get to the final 3. And if she's able to get to the final 2, she could have a case. Now, I don't think it's a guarantee that she'll win per se, but I think she'll definitely have some votes if she gets towards the end. So I think that was enough to have her above these other people, even though there's still a pretty clear number 1, which is why Rubina is here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Big Brother 26 at this point is still Chelsea. Now, admittedly, I think there's definitely some faults you can call out with Chelsea here, where the fact that she was willing to target Cam this week is pretty bad in my eyes, and the fact that she's now open to targeting Cam next week at the final 4 and going to the final 3 with MJ and Rubina is not particularly great in my eyes, considering Rubina was trying to get Chelsea on the block this week, and the fact that Chelsea doesn't fully recognize that is not particularly great there. And while it eventually works out with Kemo on his way out at this point, I'm still not loving the way Chelsea's been approaching the game here. And I feel like now there's been talk about how MJ could be this bigger jury threat than what she's letting on. And even Rubina is someone that Chelsea could potentially struggle with. And the fact that Chelsea is now willing to go to final 3 with MJ and Rubina could make it so that she has a tougher win than what you might think. Now, at the end of the day, I still think Chelsea is the biggest jury threat. And I think if she does get to the end against anyone, she should win. Though I think the fact that she's going to the end against people that would have a better shot at beating her is not particularly great. So again, I feel like Chelsea is someone who, while she is the best player in the house, I still think she has played this game kind of flawed, where even this week, the fact that she's willing to let Rubina slip on by when Rubina is pretty open to targeting her is not particularly great. And that also with her not having a guaranteed win, I think there's definitely a debate for her being lower, but I still think she is by far number 1. I still think while there are flaws with Chelsea's game, I think there are bigger flaws with other people, which is why Chelsea is still here at number 1. And there we go. That'll do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps with the channel. As I said earlier, I'll be making a jury scenarios video where I'll be going through each of the final 2 combinations and forecasting the jury votes, so you can look forward to that. I'm on Patreon and I have a YouTube membership, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.